Hey, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And this week, my editor is on vacation, so you didn't get the fancy music coming in, but I do want to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor this year for the whole year of this podcast is SailPoint. And we greatly appreciate companies like SailPoint who actually step forward and help the Austin Technology Council, or heck, those companies that help any of the local nonprofits, because we couldn't do what we do in Austin to serve this community, nor could any of the other business nonprofits, if it wasn't for companies like SailPoint who said, we're part of this community and we support what you're doing. So huge, heartfelt thanks to SailPoint. Every week on this podcast, I try to bring special guests who are going to talk about really interesting things that are going to expose you to sort of the history of Austin, what's going on now, currently in our tech community, and those who will be looking to the future. But this week, it's just going to be me. We're going to do a slightly shorter episode, and I want to talk about how Austin got to where we are. How did Austin become this amazing technology center? And also, I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned about so many other communities around the country and beyond that are really burgeoning and growing, and their communities are coming together, and they're doing really cool things in tech. So as you may have heard, if you listen to this show regularly, or if you know me, I am always talking to people about the Austin Technology Council's connection to an organization called TECNA. And TECNA is the Technology Councils of North America. You know, in North America, there are 100 independent technology councils that are serving cities, regions, and states. And 66 of these organizations belong to this organization called TECNA. And TECNA does a couple of things. It is a best practices association where people who run technology councils can get together and share ideas, talk about programs that are working, and find out ways that we can better serve each of our communities. I'll be honest that many of the leaders in TECNA from some amazing cities around the country really mentored me when I took on this job. In fact, they helped me see kind of different ways to do things, how to sort of turn the ship for the Austin Technology Council, if you will, and they really got behind me. I love the fact that there were so many people from all around the country who wanted to mentor me, and they wanted to see the Austin Technology Council and our community continue to thrive. You know, we often think about different cities as, that's competition because they're going to want to move that headquarters here or have a company open an office here or have the right resources for their startup community. But in reality, community, collaboration, and conversations rise the tide for all boats. And that's what TECNA has really been about. The other side of TECNA is it's a lobbying organization. So the Austin Technology, we have 3 charges. Number 1 is education. Number 2 is community and networking. And number 3 is advocacy. On a local and state basis, we work closely to support the Chamber of Commerce and Opportunity Austin and other groups that are working with our city and state governments. But on a national level, we are part of TECNA, and their charge is to lobby for small and mid-sized organizations because most of the bills that pass or get killed in Washington, D.C. are lobbied for by the 6 largest technology companies. And that's awesome, but the purpose and the goals of those giant companies is not always the same as what is needed when it comes to public policy for small and mid-sized growth companies. And for decades, TECNA has been there waving the flag for their member organizations, which Austin Technology Council is one, and the member companies and the communities which they serve. I got to say, public policy really matters. And the more I learn about how this impacts tech companies, the more I hope that everybody will want to get involved and learn more about what TECNA is doing in Washington, D.C. and what so many groups are doing locally and at the statewide level, because public policy impacts companies and companies impact people. And our community is just people. That's all it is. So anyway, last week I was at the TECNA meeting and there were 34 technology councils that were present in the room. Now, they had us line up at one point for a little exercise from the oldest to the youngest, not by my personal age, but by the age of our organization. The Austin Technology Council is 32 years old, and of those 34 that were in the room, we were the 6th oldest. Many of the technology councils from many of other cities go back even farther than us. However, there are so many cities that have new, fresh tech councils that are popping up and are bringing their communities together. It's really interesting to see small cities like Grand Rapids and find out what they're really doing to attract and grow technology in their region. They're a small town of, about 200,000 people, and yet they really are focused as a community on being able to provide jobs and being able to provide an ecosystem for the people who want to start technology. All the way up to large cities like Phoenix and Pittsburgh and Nashville and Denver. It was fun to see what those communities are doing. So often I think we live in a little bubble here in Austin, and we forget that there is so many things happening everywhere in the country. In fact, for many years, for almost 30 years, Austin was this shining example. We were this alternative to the big cities. We were the alternative to the Valley, to Los Angeles, to New York, and to Boston. And we were scrappy and young and on the way up. But when I talk to people all over the country and we talk about the tech scene in America, they talk about the big cities that are the tech mega hubs as being Los Angeles, the Valley, New York, Boston, and Austin. Now, it doesn't matter what people think of us or what they say, but I think internally we need to know how we're being viewed from outside looking in, because we don't get to live in a bubble anymore. We're all interconnected. I could talk to an entrepreneur today who's starting a company who 2 years from now could have 1,000 employees, but they all work remotely around the country and around the world. And that entrepreneur is maybe one of a very few who lives in Austin. That's a very different scene than 20 years ago, where if you built a 1,000-person company, most of them would probably be right here in our community. So as the world changes, ATC wants to change along with it. So I talk a lot to different groups about the history of Austin tech. Since taking on this job a couple of years ago, one of the things I realized is we've added so many people to our community over the last few years that many people don't really understand how Austin got to be this powerhouse city, this powerhouse region when it comes to technology. And so I've done a lot of research. I've talked to a lot of people, and I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. Every time I give this presentation, someone comes up and shares a new nugget of information, a new story. And that's awesome, because this is a living history. This is a living story that I'm trying to tell about how Austin got here. But many people think that the boom only began like in 2005. I talked to a lot of people and I asked the question, when did Austin really start looking towards the future of tech? And many people put that marker in the early 2000s. But arguably, you can take it back to 1966. Heck, you could go farther back to when Tracor was founded and went public in the 1950s. However, if you look back to 1966, that is when the University of Texas made the hire of Dr. George Kozmetsky to come in and be the dean of the business school. There are many people who call Dr. Kozmetsky the godfather of Austin tech. He did so many things and was so connected to so many of the early foundational things that happened in Austin that set us up to be able to boom like we are now, that if you take him out of the equation, many question if we ever would have been able to have the community that we have today as such a thriving tech center. And what's interesting is that, sure, he founded the Austin Technology Incubator, he founded IC Squared, he founded the Austin Technology Council, and so many other things. And he also was very involved both in academia and business in committees and things all over the country. Presidents had him on advisory boards to look at the economy, etc. And yet, they say that if you needed him in Austin, if you were doing something that was going to promote and help the Austin community, he would show up. He didn't have to be a featured speaker. You didn't have to give him an award. He would show up. If it was good for Austin, he would be there. And that's a message that I think we all need to embrace today is, what are we doing to help others win? Because Austin was founded on this idea of a community where everybody was there excited to help other people win. So while I was at the Techna conference a couple of weeks ago, just a week ago, when I was at that conference, they had a speaker, and he was really, really interesting. And he wrote a book called Build the Fort, the Startup Community Builder's Field Guide. And I'm only halfway through the book, but I got really excited listening to Chris Hively speak, talking about how a community can come together and lead. And it's not based on having a building or having some self-appointed people from the Chamber of Commerce or whatever saying, poof, we're now a tech hub. But it really has to be organic. there's not one person who gets to wave the flag and everybody follows. It has to be a series of nodes where people come together and do their part and are excited that their part is doing well, but also help other parts to thrive. So when Chris was speaking, and as I've been reading his book, I've gotten like sort of nostalgic, if you will, about everything he's writing about. And he's not citing Austin as the example, but everything he says that it takes to build a thriving, scrappy, up-and-coming tech community is exactly what happened in Austin. And so I've been talking for a long time about the 10 pillars that made Austin awesome. Now, this isn't a recipe book. It wasn't a plan. This is a retrospective looking back. But oftentimes people ask me about these 10 pillars, and I've spoken for several different business groups around town. I spoke at the Mayor's Breakfast for international delegates to South by Southwest, and I talk about how these 10 pillars came together. And I don't think at the time anybody realized that each of these things was making this contribution. But when you put them all together over a couple of decades, it allowed Austin to have everything in place where we were able to just pop. And that's what happened. But I want to make sure that as we move forward, we're still looking for ways to pop. Some of these pillars are gone because times change and things get more expensive, etc. And new pillars are coming in. So I don't think that we know exactly what's happening today that's going to be a pillar for tomorrow's success, but I think we can learn from the past. One of the things I tell everybody is a goal of the Austin Technology Council is to celebrate the past and to be present in the now while also looking to the future. And I think this is what we need everybody to do. My own personal motto is, how can we help others win? And I've started asking people, what boards are you serving on? What committees are you involved with? What nonprofit business groups is your company supporting? And then also, who are you mentoring? Because that's what I was fortunate enough to live through in the 90s and early 2000s. I can remember when I was about, 35 years old, and I started to get connected in the Austin business community. Two separate people separately pulled me aside and said almost the same thing. It was Pike Powers and Carol Thompson. And they both said to me, you're developing a reputation in town. You're having some success. And I was an entrepreneur. I didn't have my own company. I was in business development and sales for companies that sold to the technology community. But they both said, now that you're getting well known, it's important that you find your way to give back to Greater Austin. And they asked me, what boards are you serving on and who are you mentoring? And I took it seriously. And I based everything I did around that advice that when you reach a certain point, you've got to help others win, because not only will then the community win, but you'll win more. And my own thing I found is that when you do that, you do win. You win more when you're helping other people. And that's what I'm trying to do in this role, is I'm trying to get people excited again about how do we make sure that everybody is focused. Because as a technology innovation center, here's the thing. All of us, even if we're not the entrepreneurs who are starting companies, even if we're not the people leading the Austin office of bigger companies, it's all of our responsibility to make sure that we're serving the tech community so that small, medium, and large companies can grow. That's what makes a tech community thrive, is when everybody realizes, hey, it's not about me. It's about how do we have an ecosystem? How do we have a platform to where tech companies can grow? And I'm really excited about that. So let me go through these 10 pillars, and then I'm going to open it up to you, and I'm going to ask you all to reach out to me and share with me some other stories, maybe some other pillars that I haven't noticed. But number one, I would call that University of Texas and the hiring of Dr. Kozmetsky. The University of Texas was instrumental in doing certain things, in bringing MCC to Austin in the 80s, in putting out so many brilliant people who wanted to stay here in Austin and start their companies here. And I already talked about Dr. Kozmetsky and his influence on the business community, starting in the 1960s, but certainly in the 80s and the 90s. The founding of the Austin Technology Council, the Austin Technology Incubator, IC Squared, and always pushing people to do more and to come together. That was an important thing that set Austin on the right path. The second pillar, I think, is our central location in the country and our somewhat great weather. Yeah, this time of year it can get a little hot, But overall, we have really good weather and we're easy to get to. It's not a 6-hour flight to get anywhere else in the United States. In 4 hours, you can be in Seattle, you can be in Boston, and we're able to easily maneuver around, which made it really easy for people to come to Austin or for Austinites to go out and visit clients. So that location and the good weather is another one of those pillars. The third pillar was affordability. Let's face it, if you go back 20 and 30 years, the cost of living in Austin was so much lower than it was in all these other places. Now, it's still less expensive than the Silicon Valley or Los Angeles or New York, but not by the same margin that it was so many years ago. So I argue that the affordability pillar is moving away because things are getting more expensive. But because we have so many pillars, you can take one out and the roof is still stable. But what I like to remind everybody is you don't want to take too many pillars out without adding new ones in, or you could have your roof fall down altogether. So the affordability pillar mattered. I know it mattered to me when I moved here in 1992. I was able to afford and buy a house way before I probably would have been able to if I had stayed in Northern California. So the affordability pillar allowed people to come here and thrive. The fourth pillar was this connected community. Now, I've already talked a lot about this, that people who write books and consult to other communities talk about the fact that when people are accessible, when people are willing to open up their networks and make connections for people, that's when a community can really thrive. And Austin had this in spades. If you went back 20 years, as soon as you arrived in town, there were people who would be like, hey, can I introduce you to this person and to that person? And that connectivity and that open networking feel, that vibe of Austin about people were welcome and we wanted people to meet and collaborate and share ideas, that was really important. Now, I think we're still that way. I think we're that way more than a lot of communities, certainly big cities. However, I think this is a pillar that we all have to come together and work to shore up, because I often see people who they don't come out and participate in the community. And you can't, if you're a leader, you can't lead from behind a wall. You can't lead from your office. You can't lead sipping bourbon by your pool. You absolutely, once in a while, not all the time, have to show up. And I talk to a lot of people who all they want to do is go to private curated dinners. I talked to one CEO who said, I don't participate at open events because there's just too many people who aren't at my level. He preferred that every quarter his venture capital firm took him out to dinner with 10 or 12 other funded CEOs. And that's awesome. Private curated dinners are great, especially when I'm invited to them. However, I think it has to be a mix. There has to be those private curated dinners where you're just with people who you chose to be with. But once in a while, you have to have that connected, open, show up and talk to people, because the serendipity of community really matters. So that was our fourth pillar, and I think it's still there, but I challenge all of you to make sure it's still there, because I talk to some people who say Austin's getting harder and harder for people to really find the connections that they need. The fifth pillar was a robust business economy and the openness to startups, small and mid-sized growth companies, and large companies, because all of these came together in a place where everyone could thrive. If you were a large multinational company and you opened an office here, you could thrive. If you're one person with an idea who needs to get funding to find a co-founder, you could thrive. And in the middle, there's still a spot for those companies as well. I think that robust business economy that we've had over 30 years, and yes, we've been affected by recessions, but overall, it's been pretty cool that we have continued to grow year over year over year, and companies and the size of our economy has continued to grow. And I think that pro-business feel, that pro-business vibe, that idea of if we build it in Austin, we can grow it in Austin. I think that really contributed to the growth of our overall tech ecosystem and community. The sixth pillar is arts, music, and the Keep Austin Weird vibe. You know, there's just something about Austin when you go back to those boom boom days of the 90s and early 2000s and 2010 early teens, where it just made sense. You had, tech companies who had 3 or 4 bands made up of their employees. Austin Technology Council used to do a Battle of the Bands every year that was like one of the greatest events, because it was that mix of tech and arts. And I think that really allowed us to thrive. And there was a book that came out, 20 years ago about the rise of the creative class. And it talked about the communities that were going to thrive into the next decades. And Dr. Richard Florida wrote the book, and Austin was sort of the poster child for where the arts and music and comedy and business were able to come together. That was the future. And we certainly have lived that over the last 20 years. And while we're not as weird as we used to be, I mean, when you have a Starbucks on every corner, you're really not that weird. We still have that vibe. It's not keep Austin weird. It's keep Austin, Austin. And I think that really is still strong and really important. The seventh pillar was a young workforce. Because of the University of Texas, we're constantly putting out every year another 10 or 20,000 people who would love to stay in Austin if there were jobs for them here. And nowadays there are jobs for them here. Plus, because we have this cool vibe and so many things going on and good weather most of the year, more people have been moving here and moving here. When I moved here in 1991, the average age of an Austinite was somewhere around 30 years old. If my memory serves me, it was like 28 years old. Today, the average age of an Austinite is still around 30 years old because so many people have moved here. Sure, I'm 33 years older than when I got here. However, so many people have moved here for college or for other reasons that we have this young, vibrant vibe and a workforce of people who are hungry and trying to build their careers. And I think that just adds to the success of Austin. The eighth pillar is that we really grew a strong era of organizations that could serve our tech community. If you go back 30 years, we didn't have law firms that specialized in startups and certain different types of tech. We didn't have a whole wide range of people who were available to do funding, whether it was private equity, venture capital, or angels. We didn't have a whole network of that. Now we have a lot of people who are there to actively serve and actively help growing companies have access to capital. We have so many VCs, we have so many private equity companies, and we have unlimited amounts of angels who want to invest and see things boom. Plus, we also have the incubators in place. Austin Technology Incubator has been the longest running incubator out there. Capital Factory has done so much for this community in bolstering that whole vibe of startups and how Austin is the place where you can quit your job and grow a business. There's the Founders Institute. There are so many solution provider companies and special organizations that are here to help just feed the vibe and bring education and make connections that has allowed us to thrive. The ninth pillar is, for the most part, Texas has government policies that are pro-business. And that has helped us not only attract so many companies from California and New York and Massachusetts and Illinois, but it has also helped the local homegrown companies be able to grow and reinvest in that growth. So having that pro-business vibe and knowing that the state is pro-business has allowed us to continue to grow and thrive. Now, our state doesn't have all great policies. Some things are possibly going to hurt our economic development efforts. And so we have to be thinking about what are we doing as a state to make sure that we're staying relevant so that young people keep wanting to move here and keep wanting to start their businesses here. But historically, Texas has been the place for business, and I think it's going to remain that way for a long time. And then the 10th pillar is South by Southwest. I get calls all the time from people I know in other communities who want to start a tech conference that would rival South by Southwest. But South by Southwest didn't just start as a big tech conference. Heck, if you go back 30 plus years, it was a music conference and then a film festival. And then they started this little interactive technology piece where arts and technology and interactive because of the internet were coming together. And then it continued to grow. And then the internet exploded and internet marketing and interactive tools were coming in more and more and more. And it was just perfect timing. Plus, South by Southwest takes place the second week of March every single year. And if you think about it, what does Austin have the second week of March? Usually we have perfect weather. In the 20 plus years I've been going to South by Southwest, I think it's rained twice, maybe 3 times. Otherwise, the weather, it's like 78 degrees, a light breeze, the skies are blue. For that 1 week every year, we have better weather than San Diego, California. And everybody in the world comes to South by and they look around and they think, oh yeah, this is where I want to live. Of course, they get here in August or September and think, whoa, it's 110 degrees and humid. I didn't sign up for that. But then they're here and they realize that you can live in the heat and thrive. But South by really put the attention of the world on Austin. And it still does. That pillar is still going strong. And I think all of us in the community need to remember and embrace that South by Southwest and the Austin technology community are intertwined. Their souls touch. And I think that we have to continue to make sure that South by thrives. We're going to go through a couple of years starting after next year where the convention center in downtown Austin is going to be bulldozed. We've made a decision as a community that we need a newer, larger, more state-of-the-art convention center. And that's going to be awesome. But it's also going to take 3 years to build. And I commend South by Southwest for not saying, well, we'll go to San Antonio or we'll go to Las Vegas for 3 years. No, their soul is part of Austin and Austin is part of them. And I think that together we're going to work through 2026, 27, and 28 so that in 2029, South by is going to be able to be huger and bigger and stronger, but it's going to take the support of our whole community. And we have to remember that they are one of those 10 pillars that help make Austin great. So those are the 10 pillars that I talk about. I think there's some new things coming along. I think Austin's making some very good strides in trying to promote diversity and to help people who want to start businesses who come from all kinds of backgrounds really find a home for themselves here in Central Texas where they can build that. So I think there's going to be new pillars that'll be created that'll take the place of some of those like affordability that might have gone away or be going away. But it doesn't happen by accident. Community isn't built because we say, hello, we're building a community. Community isn't built because the Austin Technology Council is hosting a breakfast. Community is built because people show up and they care. They feel that they're connected to something bigger than them. And I really believe that the best days of Austin are ahead. However, we also have to remember that it will not happen by accident, and we need to be paying attention to what's going on in our community. Are people showing up? Are people accessible? And do we care? Do we really care about the future of Austin? I believe that a baby born today, if she wants to start a business in 20 or 25 years, that Austin, Texas is the place for her to start and grow that tech company. However, the decisions we make as a community today in 2024 and 2025, those decisions that we make right now will be the foundation to where she can build that state-of-the-art tech company 25 years from now. But it won't happen by accident. I believe that somebody will be teaching the history of Austin Tech 25 years from now, long after I'm gone, hopefully not dead, but probably won't be in this role. There'll be somebody who will be waving the flag, taking us back to the 1950s, to the 1960s, to the 1970s, talking about the 80s and then the 90s and 2000s and 2010s, but they're going to talk about the 2020s. And they're going to talk about what the people in our community did right now and who were the leaders who showed up, who said, you know what? I'm part of this community and I want to build it for tomorrow. I believe that those people are out there right now, and the Austin Technology Council is waving a flag saying, if you need a seat at the table, we want to find you a table and we want to find you a seat. It doesn't mean that ATC is the right organization for you, but I ask you, if you've listened to this whole podcast for the last now 28 minutes, I ask you, what committees are you serving on? What boards are you on? What business nonprofits is your company financially supporting? And whom are you mentoring that can be the bright spot for that next generation? Austin did not happen by accident. And those of us who are here today, we are so lucky that we had civic-minded leaders 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago who really cared. And I'm challenging all of us who are here today to not drop that baton. As people are handing that baton to the next generation, I want the next generation to be ready, eager, but also I want them to understand the responsibility that they're taking when they grab that baton and they run down that next piece of the path. Because the decisions that they make will make a difference to that next generation. Because someday, those of us who are here today, we're going to have to hand that baton off to the next generation. And we want to make sure that that foundation is strong so that we can continue to thrive. Hey, if you listened all the way through this half hour, thank you so much for listening to my rant and the 10 pillars that I think made Austin great. I want you to share your ideas with me. You can send me an email at Thom, Thom, at austintechnologycouncil.org and share with me. If you agree with me, great. If you have a new story to tell, awesome. If you disagree with me, that's fine too. Just be respectful. And I'd love to have a conversation with you. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thanks for being part of the Austin Tech community. And let's look to the future together. And again, make sure that you're subscribed to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And make sure that you're telling everybody in your company and that you're telling your friends, because the only way a podcast grows is when people like you say, hey, listen to this show. It sucks less than other podcasts, and it's going to inspire you. It's going to give you some ideas. The more people we can get involved to listen, the more people we can get involved in our organization and the other business nonprofits that are around town, the more our whole community wins. When we live with this idea of help others win, we all win. And that's what I want to see happen for Austin. Thanks so much for tuning in. Share the podcast, and we'll see you back here next week.